Grief is such an overpowering emotion, especially after losing someone so close to you. It can take months, years, even decades to get back to normal, if that's even possible after experiencing a significant loss. This podcast was created to help you move through and release the emotions, allowing you to heal the hurt and begin living again. Listen in as I chat with medical professionals, grief workers, and people who have first-hand experience in losing a loved one, what their experience has been, and what they did to help heal themselves and those around them. Life isn't always sunshine and rainbows, but I believe there is always a silver lining if you're willing to look. Welcome to the Release Podcast. Welcome to another episode of Release Grief Podcast. Today I am here and I forgot to double check her last name. Is it Beth Erlander?
Exactly correct.
Woo-hoo-hoo!
Bing, bing, bing.
Good. I usually try to always, I know it's so weird, but I've had guests come on here and I have completely butchered their name that I was doing a great job at. So I usually try to, before we get on, I just like double check the pronunciation of your name. And yeah, I didn't do that. So
That's fine. You
but
got it.
the stars are aligning today. Anyway, welcome to the podcast that is all about grief, that is all about death and loss and dying and the beautiful journey that we go through. Although people don't see it that way when it first happens, but
Mhm.
a little bit through it, you realize, hey, I've learned a lot from this,
Mhm.
learned a lot that I can take away and apply to every area of my life. So, why did you decide to come on to this podcast all about death, dying, loss, and grief? And I do try to be funny on here, although, like we mentioned earlier, I am not a stand-up comedian. I missed that opportunity in life, and I'm not going back. I'm not meandering from this.
Oh, Faith, I love how you bring the humor in. I think it's necessary in conversations like this.
Oh, I agree.
So,
I kind of like diffuses the deep, heavy emotions. I don't want to bypass anyone's emotion with it, but
no
I also don't think we need to stay in like this deep, settled, um,
heaviness.
yeah,
Yeah.
heaviness. It's too much for too long. Like it's
Yeah.
okay to pass through it, but don't stay in it. Don't camp out. Don't build a house there.
Right. Don't set up camp there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So tell me, I know you in the questionnaire you wrote a few things.
Yep.
I did read them all. But I noticed you have a book behind you. Can we start with that?
Sure. So this is my grief journey. Um, so my loss is not a death loss. So it's called Life Upside Down, the Fall That Transformed Our Lives, Lifting Me Through Grief, Love, and Quadriplegia.
Oh, wow. Are you a quadriplegic?
I am not a quadriplegic. I wouldn't be able to sit in this chair and
Gotcha.
move my hands and do things. My partner
Oh, duh.
is a quadriplegic, and he was in a mountain biking accident in 2012.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I always said at that time, after that time, our life went upside down. My life went upside down.
Hmm.
And it was obviously a very challenging time. And it was also very confusing because so much in my life felt like it had died. So I think
Right.
death can also be, where my life was going and what our relationship was. And,
Hmm.
our physical bodied relationship was completely different. So many things died in our life, but he was still alive.
Right.
So
Okay.
I remember at that time trying to find grief support. And a lot of the groups and books that I found, because I became like a grief geek, and then I actually called myself a grief freak for a while. And that meant that I was so passionate about grief and trying to understand what was happening to me and in this process that I was looking for so many resources. And most of the resources I found, excuse me, were talking about death loss.
Yeah.
And so I remember going to this one event once. It was a fundraiser for a grief support thing in Boulder. And they kept talking about death loss, which, if that's what the organization is, it's fine. But I was the person in the back mumbling under my breath, like whenever she would refer to grief loss and death loss, I would say, and life transitions,
Yeah.
and life transitions. And so I had a really hard time in the beginning trying to find the right support and the right books even to speak to my loss. So the book that I wrote, and because I also didn't find anybody who had written about being a caregiver and being with, so Michael and I, Michael's my partner, worked together for 3 years. And then
Hmm.
his accident happened. And so we were right at that point where we were like, okay, we're doing this. We're living together now and we're headed towards, marriage or a commitment to each other. It was like we found each other, we were life partners.
Right,
Um, and so I wasn't just gonna give up on that because
right.
his able-bodiedness changed and our life turned into a life of disability. And I suddenly had to be his caregiver. Um, so yeah, that's
That's huge because there's a lot of people that would have just walked away because that would have been such a huge a huge change.
yeah,
And you were mourning the loss of the life that you thought that you had or were going
yes,
to have.
yes,
Because
yes,
I mean, nobody ever wakes up one day and says, "Oh, I want to experience life as a quadriplegic," or life with
right,
a quadriplegic.
right.
Or,
I want
I
to
want to
become a
experience
caregiver.
losing my child or whatever. I want to
Right.
experience, this traumatic uh health issue that I now have to face on a daily. Nobody wishes for that shit.
No, no. As I always like to say, nobody plans for disability either.
No,
No,
no.
no.
Nobody plans for death either, let's be real.
Oh, totally. Especially in this culture. We don't talk about it. We don't.
No. I'm finding out that more and more. The more that I get into planning this plan your own
Oh,
funeral
right,
retreat,
right,
people don't talk about death and they don't plan for it.
right,
Talk about the legacy and they're like, "Oh yeah, I got my trust set up." I'm like, do you? But is it like what are your instructions for like when you pass?
right.
Do
Exactly.
they know what to do with all of this?
Exactly. Yeah. And so that was part of our story too, because Michael didn't have anything set up.
Yeah.
So we had to do all of that while he was in the hospital and couldn't speak
Mm.
because he was intubated.
I was gonna
Um,
say, can he speak now?
oh yeah. Oh
Okay,
yeah.
perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that also made me realize like, oh, I need to also
Yeah.
set up my will and get the details right, get them set for because we never know. I think that's
Never.
one of the lessons that his accident taught me is like we have no control over when we're going to go or when we're going to die or when something awful may happen to us. So let's be ready.
Right. I mean, it's not like you get car insurance because, you're expecting to crash.
Right.
You get car insurance for just in case. Like, well, I want to be covered. Like, it's the same for planning for an unfortunate event in your world. Like, you want
Exactly.
to be covered. You don't want to be left with your riches hanging out, drying in the wind. You don't want
Right.
that.
No. No.
So, how did his accident happen? I know you said it was a mountain bike accident.
Yeah, it was a mountain biking accident. It was a beautiful afternoon. It was August 27th. That date is etched in my brain forever in my heart. He was up actually doing a little bit of ceremony at the time, and I'll just be real vulnerable and add this to it. I had asked him a few months prior for him to get clear about whether or not he wanted to get pregnant with me.
Mm.
And so he was up trying to find some answers for that,
Mm.
some other things he was working on with his family lineage. And it was dusk. He had a moment where he said to himself, oh, it's getting dark. I can't really see. I should probably get off my bike and walk down. And he didn't. And he hit a 5-inch protrusion of rock and flew over the handlebars and fell. And when he fell, his neck broke instantly.
Oh,
And so that's the first chapter of my book. It starts with that.
yeah.
And so the beginning of my book is quite intense because it also, it's all about getting him to the hospital and being in the hospital. And
Was he by himself or was there other people with him?
he was by himself. He was the
Mm.
last one down the trail. Um, he was he probably would have been down to his car in like 2 minutes or less. He wasn't that far up the trail. I've been up there quite a few times to the exact spot and have done some ceremony myself there and just
Hmm.
connected with the land and the rock. And I mean, it's a beautiful spot too. It's beautiful. It's up
Yeah.
near, it's the Hall Ranch Trail in Lyons, Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you mean by ceremony? Explain that, please.
Um, yeah, so one of the things that has evolved over the time since being post-accident is that we started working with a shamanic practitioner.
Mm, okay.
This was like a few years ago, and Michael wanted to do that to kind of heal from his transition into being the person he is now from where he was.
Mhm.
And so then I started working with her also. We started working with her as a couple. And I am have kind I've evolved, my spiritual practice has evolved into being an animist, which an animist is someone who believes that everything has consciousness or a
Mm,
sense of being alive. And so I have an elemental practice that also is informed by my studies and time with my mentors, Elder Malidoma Somé and Sabamfu Somé. I don't
okay.
know if you've heard of either of them. Sabamfu
Oh.
Somé taught Westerners how to grieve. And in their culture, in the Dagara culture, they highly regard the elements of earth, fire, water, nature, and mineral.
Okay.
So going up and doing ceremony and just saying prayers there to the elements to also, I have more of an ancestor connection
Hmm.
and also honoring the ancestors of the land where we live
Yeah.
is really important. And so working with them and with the element of, it's a mineral. So because he fell on a slab of rock.
Right.
And then also just honoring the trees that were around and witnessing, so they were there
Yeah.
seeing him. So I go up and I bring a gift, actually. I usually bring milk and honey and flowers and apples. And it's been a journey to get there, but I say thank you to
Hmm.
the rock. And I'm feeling emotional as I say that.
Yeah.
Because what happened, because of his accident, eventually what happened, I mean, I was already a therapist at that time. And I was wanting to go in a different direction, working with kids, and wanted to have my own kid and doing more like play therapy and art therapy, which I was already doing. And then when this happened, I was like, I had already done my internship in graduate school many years ago for with hospice. So I was already working with death and dying.
Yeah.
Um, but it was then that I was like, no, I'm going to be working with grief because now I know what it's like because I've been on the inside. It's not
Yeah.
just theory from books, it's like I know that this fucking sucks.
Yeah.
And yet I also know that my grief is my medicine. Like I
Hmm.
learned, like grief was my best teacher to learn how
Yeah.
to deal with this. And now it informs my practice. And I wouldn't have gotten there if it wouldn't have been that rock.
Yes. Yes to all of that. I feel so when we lost Cassandra, like I wanted to turn straight to grief. This was in 2016. I wanted to turn
Yeah.
straight to grief, but I was her stepmother, and therefore I thought that I didn't have a voice in that realm.
Right.
So
Uh-huh.
I pulled back. And then in 2021, we lost our granddaughter. And I'm like, no, I switched everything to grief. And it's just like this, I don't know, it's almost like your soul and your body and your mind just all connect and slam together. And it's like, boom, this is it. Did I know
Right.
what I wanted to do in grief? No. But I
Right.
knew that it needed to be grief related
Yep.
uh, because I have all of this almost like a front row seat to everything.
Right.
And I have these different perspectives that a lot of people aren't talking about,
Right. Exactly.
um, and how to, I don't know. It's interesting how your grief shapes you
Mm-hmm.
and how you shape your grief as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's a beautiful journey, obviously I wouldn't wish it on anyone,
No.
but the beauty that I've found walking on this journey is that it's a beautiful journey. Like I've learned so much more about myself and how I handle stress, how I handle grief, how I handle hardships, but then also how I help others through them, and not just
Yeah.
focus on just myself or whatever. So
Right.
it's beautiful. So thank you for bringing that up because I don't think people understand a lot of that, especially if they're new into it and they're just being stuck into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're frozen. Are you there? Beth? Hold, please.
Yeah. Okay.
Yay, you're back.
I'm back. Oh, the world of Zoom and technology and internet. Here we
Oh,
are.
it's great when it works. It sucks when it doesn't.
I
So,
know.
um, well, I just was saying thank you for sharing like all of that, the beautiful journey and how you're honoring like everything around the accident. Because I've not been to like Cassandra's accident site and honored that. I've not been to my granddaughter's Peyton's accident site
Right.
and honored that.
Yeah.
Although I have sent up gratitudes and platitudes for like the journey and the lessons that it's taught me and all of
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
So I do
Yeah.
to a certain extent. But I love the ceremony stuff that you're talking about. I think
Yeah.
it brings forth another element for people to understand and,
Yeah.
kind of make peace with everything.
Exactly. It also, Faith, it reminds me of roadside graves that we see
Yes.
along the way. And something that I'm interested in, but I don't have the training in, but I have this deep curiosity around what do we do at the places of especially where somebody has a tragic death or a sudden
Yeah.
death, such as suicide or accidents, like there needs to, I think there needs to, something needs to be done at the sites.
Yeah.
So that's one thing where I'd love to get some support and training in that from my shamanic practitioners in the future. But
Well, I have thought the same thing.
uh-huh.
Only for um the understanding of, so I think it was a year ago now. At the time of this recording, it would have been almost a year and a half ago. Our next door neighbor had committed suicide in his front
Mhm.
yard.
Wow.
And we went to him and he was in his 50s, no children, no wife. His house was paid for or almost paid for. And I mean, he was doing great.
Yeah.
At least we thought. Like we weren't real close with him. My husband knew him. I didn't know him very well at all.
Hmm.
My husband grew up with him because they've lived here forever.
Hmm.
And went to his funeral and um I started hearing these stories about the curse of 113, which is the road that we live on.
Oh,
And
wow.
all of these weird or suspicious, not I wouldn't say suspicious,
Huh.
but abnormal deaths, like these suicides that are
Yeah.
happening, or just out of normal deaths for these people.
Weird. Yeah.
And so I started digging into that a little bit. And eventually I want to write a book on it. Eventually I would love to write a book on it, but I have to do much more research on
Uh-huh.
this specific topic.
Yeah.
So we started chatting around with people, because there's got to be, I want to say there was like 8 or 9
Wow. That's a
odd,
lot.
like not suspicious. I don't want to say suspicious because it wasn't like a murder or anything like that, but there was like suicides and just like abnormal deaths, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
And so I started digging into this and talking with some people, and I'm like, we should do like a survey of the land. Have they done a survey of the land? Like what was here before us? Because I watched
Yep.
Yellowstone. I've watched
Yep.
it wasn't Yellowstone. It was 1923. I don't know if
Yes.
you've
Great
seen that.
show. Yep.
There was a scene in 1923 where the father and the son were laying out there by a campfire and they were
Right.
tending the herd or whatever. And
Right.
father makes this comment just like out of the blue. He goes, every civilization is built on top of another civilization. And
Hmm.
to me, that was like mind
Right.
blowing because, okay, yeah, we're here now, but what was here before us?
Exactly.
What was here before them? What was
Right.
here before them?
Right.
And so I started looking into like the history of this property. Come
Uh-huh.
to find out, in the state that I live in Minnesota, specifically in my county, they have there was Indian burial grounds, and the type of Indians were the Mounds Indians, and they
Mm.
buried their people vertical as opposed to horizontal.
Mm.
So you have all these big, and so literally in my backyard, not in our property, but in my backyard, on the neighbor's property, is the second highest point in our county.
Oh,
And
interesting.
along this whole pathway here, because there's a lake across the road from us, uh, the Indians settled here, and so this
Ah,
was Indian burial grounds. So
right.
we have settled
Wow.
on Indian, and so of course that's, I don't know, like if there was massive like wars. I don't know what happened as far as that. I haven't
Yeah.
gotten all the information, but if you believe in the spiritual realm, and I do, because
Yep, I do
there's
too.
things that happen, beyond our control, and things like that are unexplained, and I can't explain them. Um, but if you believe in the spiritual realm, then those souls are still here and
Hmm.
they're angry.
Hmm.
And so I have been, and without my knowledge of even this, I had been praying, peace upon our property and health and healing and just
Yeah.
providing protection for my family on this property.
Right,
And
right.
interesting because this property like feels peaceful when we sit upon it
Uh-huh.
in our home. That's why I hate to leave my house. But
Right, right.
because outside it feels chaotic. It feels
Oh, wow.
unrestful. It feels
Yeah,
uneasy. When I'm here, everything feels like in alignment and, perfect harmony. Uh,
right.
but it's interesting how you talk about like the elements and the being and the energy, because everything is energy. Everything
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah, and I think if I were you, Faith, I might reach out to maybe a shamanic practitioner there or somebody who does this kind of work. And it makes me wonder if something needs to be done on the land, like some offerings or
Oh,
acknowledge
I'm sure it probably does. And
something.
we've done
Yeah,
some here on our
yeah,
property and stuff. Because I'm not gonna go into the neighbor's property and all of that. And I
right,
don't know if maybe I can offer it from here, because if they travel there, they'll travel here too.
right.
But I don't know, and I don't know what I don't know,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
could be
yeah.
saying all the wrong things. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the whole area. I don't know, I don't
I'm
know.
learning. I'm just learning and I'm absorbing all this information and all this culture, because we didn't invent death, we didn't invent dying.
Mm-hmm.
um it was something that was here from the moment we're born. We knew we were going to die.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yep,
how and the when are not up to us.
right.
I mean, I guess they can be, but
Yeah,
if you choose it.
right.
But it's just, I don't know, I'm fascinated with it, and
Yeah.
people think I'm very morbid, but I'm like I don't care. I'm fascinated by this because this is one of the oldest things that
Mm-hmm.
happens to us
Mm-hmm.
in our entire world.
Yeah,
And the world is
yeah.
feeling this, not just America or Canada or
Everybody.
Mexico. This is worldwide. Death is a worldwide event.
It's worldwide and it's also it's with other species. It's with
Yeah,
plants and
absolutely.
animals. Yeah. Yep. I think I've read recently the only thing that stay alive are the mountains and something else. I can't remember, but it was basically the elements.
Yeah. I mean, they're
Yeah.
always here,
Yep.
always here.
Yep.
If those mountains could talk, I wonder what they would say.
Mhm. You just
These
gotta
humans
listen.
are all idiots and they keep killing themselves and each other and everything around them.
And there they are building houses on burial grounds again. Right.
But that would just mean that the whole world is a burial ground too, because, every aspect of it would be. So
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
got way off topic on this one, but I have loved this because I don't get to talk with a lot of people about this, because a lot of
Uh-huh.
people don't like, they just think I'm overreaching or far-fetched or
No, not at
whatever it
all.
is. But
Not at all.
I have a bunch of reports on when they did studies here on Wright
Yeah.
County for the Mounds Indians and stuff like that. There's lots of papers
Yeah.
written on it.
Yeah. I'm totally curious about that. So yeah, keep going with that curiosity and research.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you got into grief, like You said that you were a practitioner before?
Yeah, I was a
Therapist?
psychotherapist. I was a therapist and I still am a therapist. But right now I'm also a grief coach.
Okay.
I call myself a grief coach. I did a program in 2016 called the what do they call it? Creative Grief Support Practitioner Training.
Oh, there you go.
And in graduate school, I was in art therapy. So I'm an art therapist. I'm an artist. And I really loved that program because it brought in creativity, which I find
Mm-hmm.
is so helpful when you're grieving. So with my work with people as a grief coach or supportive grief practitioner, um, creative, yeah, anyway, it's too long of a title. I can't remember. But I'm always thinking about what does this person need in order to keep their grief moving, is how I describe my work a lot. Like, how do we keep that process going and moving and they can learn from it? They may need some creative prompts or tools to help them understand what happened and to integrate the process. And, I think it's really important. And I'm often trying to help them find that, because another loss that I had was that right after my partner's accident, I was no longer journaling. And I was
Mm-hmm.
a journaler. I was no longer making art. It didn't make any sense. And so what helped me with other stress in my life prior to the accident didn't help me anymore. And so
Mm-hmm.
I lost those for a few years. Um, and I think that's something that we don't talk about.
Right.
Grief, like the other losses that happen because of our main loss. Um, and so that's why I'm always asking, like, what used to work for you, or what are you doing? What is helping? Or, and then have them try other creative prompts, you know?
Do you find that people don't actually know what helps them?
Oh, yeah.
I was just curious because before we lost our daughter, I would have not known at all.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you're just like, I mean, as I described it, my life was upside down. I didn't know what was what and what, like what's going on. Um, yeah. And so I also talk to people who are in acute grief and
Mm-hmm.
acute loss, like, are you tending to your body? Are you eating? Are you drinking water? So it just comes down to the basics, right? Of being human, and maintaining this physical body. And it's hard to get sleep and it's hard to eat. And
Yeah.
it's also even hard to drink water sometimes. So helping them to get by and get through that initial period is challenging.
It is challenging because when that energy becomes stagnant, it starts to build.
Right? Right.
Eventually it blows.
Yep. Yep.
That
Yep.
was mine. I was going to start at one point in time, almost like a rage room to help
Yes.
with the anger. Like that's the one that I come back to all the time. Not so much anymore, but you still get angry, of the life that you thought that you would have, which is unmet expectations.
Right. Right.
Um, but you still get angry, or I do anyway.
I
Um,
do too. I was really angry in the beginning for quite a while.
yeah,
I was fucking full of rage. And I
yeah,
didn't know where to put it.
right.
Didn't know where to put it.
And it's just so when we first lost her, I looked up all these places to go, for support and help, and it's like, oh, let's write out your stuff. I'm like, I don't want to fucking write. I
Right.
don't want to write. I don't want to sit here in a group and I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
I'm a physical person. I need something else.
So did you find something to
No,
help your anger?
no, I didn't. I turned to more of the mindset work that I had trained in,
Uh-huh.
when you start an online business, you realize real quick the mindset shit that you need, that
Right.
you don't have.
Right.
Prior to that, I didn't think I needed any mindset work. I thought it was perfect. But lo and
Yeah.
behold,
Right.
I
Right.
learned
Right. Right.
otherwise.
Right.
And so I just went ahead with the mindset stuff, and really grounded myself with that and doing
Yeah.
meditations and stuff. But
Yeah.
it was hard
Yeah. The
because I
thing that,
wanted to punch the lights out of something.
yes,
I just wanted to tear the
absolutely.
shit out of something. I wanted to destroy something because that
Yep.
was exactly how I felt.
Yeah. I totally get that. I totally understand. Um, the thing that helped me with that was I found the Dagara style grief ritual. which with Sabam Fusome, and
Mm-hmm.
she died in 2017. But there are people who still, and I still do this with a dear friend of mine. We run a grief rituals every once in a while in their tradition, and I was so grateful to find her and to actually do a grief ritual with her because you set up a grief altar.
Okay.
It's part of the like you build it as a community. The first time I did it with Sabamfu was at the Brighton Bush Hot Springs in
Okay.
Oregon, and I was in a group of 60 people, and I thought, oh goodness, how are we going to do this? That's a lot of grief. The first night we ran around the big circle naming what is your grief. That took
Mm-hmm.
a long time. And then the next
Yeah.
day we built the grief altar and a few other altars. And I remember I talk about it in my book. I remember feeling like I was a racehorse, like right before that gate. So she said an invocation to all the elements to open up the ritual, and then she let us like I felt like I was let loose and I ran straight to the grief altar, and it's a place where you could rage. I pounded my fists on the floor. I screamed. I lost my voice because I was just raging so hard. It was the only place where I felt like I had permission to do that. And what
Hey,
was so great, Faith, is that everybody else around me was doing the
we're
same
doing the same
thing.
damn thing.
Yeah.
That sounds beautiful. Do you still host those?
Yes, I haven't done one in a while, but yeah,
Oh,
I hope to do one in 2025.
oh,
Um,
please let me know so I could put it out to some of my
Absolutely.
people. And
Yeah.
oh man, that sounds powerful because if we don't move that energy tends to build and then you become sick, you become stagnant, you
Yeah.
become listless in your life,
Yes. Yes.
and then you just perish. Like life is just life is controlling you at that point.
Yes, yes. And I think, well, I want to share one of my favorite
Yeah.
Sabanfu-isms that she would say. She said, you need to open up the pipes of grief to allow more life force and joy to flow.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it gets stuck and we can't find it, you know?
What happens with the
And
stagnant lake? It poisons you.
yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people don't understand, like, if you allow the grief to come through and to express itself fully, you're going to find more joy and life force energy.
I know it's
So,
weird to me. Oh, go ahead.
oh,
Sorry.
I was just going to say, so many people are afraid to open up to their grief. They
Yeah.
sort of
Oh,
push it
yeah.
away, stuff it down, put it aside.
I think they think that if they open it up, that's how it's going to be forever.
Right,
But actually, it's not because you've released it. So it's like it doesn't show up as often anymore. It like
right,
tends to, I mean, at the beginning, obviously, it's there all the time, but then
right.
eventually it starts to taper off and
Yep.
taper off. And you have these, I don't know, these beautiful moments
Yeah.
where you're like, okay, this is
In
pretty good.
Yeah, in my first few years, I remember feeling I would do rituals like almost on a quarterly basis, and then I started leading them. And as a leader, hosting those or doing those, I would get, a lot out of it too, even though I was holding space for it.
Absolutely.
But I started to learn like I needed a grief ritual every few months.
Yeah,
It like cleaned out the pipes.
absolutely. Like it
Yeah,
just makes sense. Like
yeah,
you take your vehicle in for an oil change
yep,
every few months,
yep. Or you go and
You
get your teeth
clean it.
cleaned.
Yes, every few months.
Yeah,
That makes 100% sense. I love that. I love how you
yeah,
put
yeah,
it those analogies,
yeah, yeah,
like cleaning out your pipes every couple months.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So you mentioned in your bio, gosh, I'm gonna lose it here, but let me look here. You mentioned, dun, 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 dun. Oh gosh.
Is it my new program, The Wheel of Grief?
No, it wasn't that. I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. I do want to talk
Uh,
about that though.
Yeah, we do want to talk about that.
Okay.
Because I do want to talk about the wheel of grief. Oh, befriending grief.
Uh-huh.
That was interesting. So explain that to me.
Well, I sometimes see grief as a disheveled, grubby human that shows up at your front porch, your door, and it just wants to come in. And what I said about how people don't want to invite it in, they want to push it aside. It's like, they avoid this grubby human that's banging at the door saying, "Hey, I want your attention. I need to
I
come
feel it.
inside."
Hmm.
And so what befriending grief is like, you got to open the door and invite them in and like sit down and have a cup of tea, feed it some cookies, like get to know it and ask like, okay, what do you need? You're here. I mean, it's there, right? It's
Yeah.
so there all the time in the beginning, especially. And so you
Yeah.
have to soften and open and get to know it, you know? So that's
Yeah.
what I mean by befriending grief.
I love that. It is so true. Because, at the first I didn't want anything to do with the grief. I just wanted it to go away.
Exactly.
I just
Yeah,
wanted to go away.
absolutely. Me
But
too.
it did not. Like your little grubby friend, it kept knocking at the door.
Right. Or as one of my clients said a long time ago, she said, it's like grief is like wearing a wool bodysuit and you can't take it off. And you have to get used to wearing this itchy bodysuit, right?
Hmm.
It's uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable, but you
Yeah.
figure out what lotion to put on underneath it so it's not so itchy. Or you
Right.
figure out like how much more water to drink to make it
Right.
more soothing. Or
Right.
you figure out the things that your body needs to be
Yeah.
able to wear that suit.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So then you talked about your wheel of grief. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. I'm kind of launching it out into the world in 2025, which is today. So happy New Year.
At the time
Um,
of this recording.
yes, at the time of
Yes,
this
we are
recording.
recording on New Year's Day.
Yeah. Perfect time to talk about grief.
Right.
So it's called the Wheel of Grief, and it can be done as a one-on-one program for 3 months. And then I'm also launching a group program on February 6th.
Ooh.
And I'm excited because it's kind of like all the tools that I've developed or used or have helped me, and then I put it into this program. And so the key component of it is the use of or using and learning from the four directions
Okay.
from the world traditions. So I've studied with a Lakota man, doing shadow work, and with my process with him, and then I worked with another shaman who's based in Mexico, and then my lineage is of Northern Europeans, so the Norse tradition or the Celtic. And once you get this goes back to animism, like all these traditions go back to the elements
Okay.
from the beginning and go back to the four directions, or the medicine wheel, as it's also called. So in my program, we're gonna learn from each direction and how it relates to your grief journey. And so essentially, it gives you a map that you can be like, oh, I really feel like I'm in um, the area of the West, for example, is all about loss. It's the time of day is dusk. The time in the year is fall. So it's the grief time. So
Okay.
I'm in the emotion and in my heart in the area of the West, and I'm feeling stuck there. So maybe I need to look at either the area of the East, or maybe it's the South, or pulling on, like, so they can look at that and then and have those as tools to use in their grief journey.
Okay.
So
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
And you're offering these are 1-day events?
The no, so that's a 3 month program for
A
the
3-month
one-on-one work, or for the group program, it's going to be 6 months. And I love that we're starting in February, which is like maybe the middle, like kind of beyond the middle of winter, but we're in the dark.
Yeah.
And we're going to go through to July, past the summer solstice. But I love this journey from the winter to summer,
Yes.
because in my opinion, also, I felt like I was stuck in winter in my
Mm.
grief for at least the first 3 years.
Yeah. I feel like I'm only just now coming into like spring.
Uh-huh.
Everything is blooming and blossoming, and like if we're talking in those analogies,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel so heavy anymore. Like there's potential, and
Yeah.
new birth is on the horizon, for different things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's where I feel like I'm at. So,
Yeah. Welcome to spring. It's such a good feeling, right?
oh, it's an amazing feeling, and I never thought that I would be here, and I had no words to put to it. So thank you for giving me the words to put to it, because
Absolutely.
otherwise it just like, I don't know, I was mentioning like the end of this in 2024, it just feels different. My
Uh-huh.
grief feels different. I don't know how to
Uh-huh.
describe it,
Yeah,
but it feels
absolutely.
lighter. It feels like full of potential. It feels, I don't know.
Yeah, it's cleaned up a little bit. It's no longer that grubby human.
Yeah, the grubby human has finally washed his face.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
Maybe his hands, hopefully his hands too. But yeah,
Good
I'm like,
shave, you know. Yeah.
maybe we'll see. I don't know. I mean, that might be taking it a little far, but
Yeah. Yeah.
oh my gosh, this has been beautiful and so full of knowledge.
Thank
Um,
you. Oh, I did want to speak because you asked about the one day thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I do want to add that I have been holding monthly events that are free and online. Like, for example, in mid-January, I'll be doing a 3-day event. I'm calling it a grief transformation journey. And so we're going to be meeting an hour each day, and I'm going to be giving them some creative prompts. I always do some somatic exercises because I'm somatically based.
Hmm.
So I always give some
And for those that don't know, explain what somatic is.
body.
Okay.
Soma is body. So I'm a body-centered psychotherapist or body-centered coach. And I think this is also really important with grief because it all happens in the body.
Yeah.
So I teach a lot of simple exercises for them to do to help their body. So that's going to be, I always include those in the one day. They're usually about an hour up to 2 hours. And I'm doing those monthly. So there'll be one in February, and I don't have that scheduled yet, but I tell my story, and people can learn how to work with me, and I offer some tools for them
Oh,
for their grief. Yeah.
that sounds perfect. Okay. So, since we're at this moment in time in this podcast, and this is the perfect segue, how can they reach you and follow you and get into your sphere of genius and all of that to work with it, to
Yeah.
help with their grief and stuff and to take part in
Yeah.
all this stuff?
Yeah. Well, I'm on social media on Instagram, and I'm Beth underscore Erlander underscore grief underscore friend. And same thing on Facebook. And I'm also on LinkedIn with just Beth Erlander. I'm also on, I was going to say Twitter, but it's not that, TikTok. And where else can you find me? You
Do
know,
you
they
have
can,
a website?
yeah, I was just going to say you can go to my website, which is betherlander.com
And
and
that
sign
has
up.
everything in there, right? Like all your links and everything?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Perfect. And don't worry, I will post the links and the website and everything down below the show notes,
Yep.
as always. So don't forget to look there.
Yep.
And oh my
And
God.
if people want to buy my book, they can go to my website. There's a page there, or it has its own website, um, crowflowpublications.com. And at the bottom of that page is a beautiful video, which may make you cry because it's kind of it, it's like it's a trailer for the book.
Mhm.
And back to the book, it's been called an unofficial guidebook to grief and a romance that reads like a thriller.
Ooh, sounds exciting.
Yes.
Excited. I'm gonna have to go buy that thing myself.
Yeah. And it's on Amazon. That's where you'll go to buy it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So any last words of encouragement or thoughts or whatever you would like to leave our listeners with?
Oh, I think I'd just say, keep going as slow as you need to. Take care of your body, you know, try to rest, and just know this isn't forever.
Mm,
It changes, and just like, yeah, I think I used to use the mantra, this too shall pass,
mhm.
quite often in the beginning. you know.
That's so true. We think that everything is going to stay the same and our circumstances will always be as they are.
Yeah.
That is rarely ever the case.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I should say it's never the case. It always changes.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah,
just
but
be real.
when you're in that grief though, it doesn't feel like it's ever going to change.
No, it's like the seconds tick by like days.
Yeah.
And everything just feels so much longer and so much harder and more
Yeah.
difficult and
Yep.
everything
Yep.
when you're in the midst of it. But it will change.
It
Like
does.
we are living proof that it will change,
Yes. It's
and
certainly true.
life can be beautiful again.
Yep. Yeah.
So thank you so much for being on here and sharing everything. I have learned so
Well,
much myself. I'm
well,
excited to dig in and check out
yeah.
all your stuff and get your
Well,
book and
thanks.
read it and in
Yeah.
the trailer or with the trailer as it's playing, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but
Well,
thank you
thank you.
so much for being a part of my community.
Well, thanks for having me, Faith. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and thanks for doing the work you're doing. And yeah,
Right back at you because
yeah,
it's difficult work, but it needs to be done.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
You're
Bye,
welcome.
everyone. I will see you in the next episode. Make sure you go and look at Beth. Make sure you go get her book. Follow the podcast, like it, subscribe it, and share it out to everyone. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of Release. All the links plus a few extras are posted in the show notes below. And if you think someone you know could benefit by listening to this episode, please share it with them. And as always, keep going, keep being, keep doing. You are amazing.